Starliner Media. Starliner Media presents Music Night at the Majestic with your host, Michael Boswell. Brought to you by...
When Signs and Displays Direct was launched 15 years ago, it featured a complete line of banners and stands, product displays, and more. Today, the company is known as SDD and is the industry leader in turnkey, no-inventory POP programs. SDD has expanded into branding programs for both corporate and private label, as well as consulting services for retail showroom design and more. Visit sdd-us.com. That's sdd-us.com. All right, it's time once again for Music Night at the Majestic, and with us tonight, Johnathan Pushkar. Johnathan, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you for having me, Michael. Glad to be here.
We're glad to have you. Well, tell you what, ironically, Any Second was the song of the day today.
How about that? That's so cool. Thank you.
Go figure.
That's fantastic. Leading right up, the album comes out tomorrow or tonight at midnight for our night owls.
Well, I'm sure there's people camped out everywhere just waiting for the doors to open.
I think I saw the line at Target this morning. I think they're already lined up. So don't worry, there will be enough for everybody.
Well, I'll tell you what, I've got my copy right here, Compositions.
Oh, fantastic.
And tell you what, let's talk about that album. We'll get into some of the other stuff first, but it's coming out. I really like the artwork on it. It's got a nice little theme you got going there.
Thank you so much. It's the old composition notebook. And how that came about is, I started writing this album pretty much the day that my first album came out in September 2019. And started, sketching out material and whatnot. And I just found myself staring at blank pages a lot. And I was just really captivated by how a blank page can turn into a song, which can turn into something deeper from the soul. And I just loved that this would be a collection. And I thought, hey, why not theme it? So if you get the album, you get a little notebook to go with it. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, you mentioned like starting with a blank page. Mm-hmm. When you write, are you generally speaking, a music first or a lyric first?
It's a great question. And I love talking with different artists because I think we all have our own unique answer to this. So for me, honestly, it usually is music first. However, I really pride myself on, at least the theme of the lyrics of my songs, right? I really don't like to write throwaway songs that aren't about anything. And, I pull a lot from the 60s genre, which of course are all very lovey-dovey boy-girl kind of songs. It just kind of comes with it. But I always like having a little twist. So like, for example, on this album, the track Just Friends has a little country backbeat to it. And it's kind of a ironic country song, right? The idea being every time I fall for a girl, she says we're just friends. And so it's fun. It's a little, throwback country sound, but there's a little angle to it. Or like, for example, now there's a little reveal in the plot of the song of Any Second now at the end. So I always like to tell a little story for the listeners, and hopefully they enjoy those little twists and resonate with the stories as much as I do writing them.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you mentioned the 60s being a big influence on you. Who would you say are a few of the artists that have had the biggest impact in your music?
Sure. Well, I'll probably reference the artists that I think you'll hear the most influence of on this album. Of course, I'd be remiss not to say the Beatles with the 12-string guitars and the swinging drums. I mean, of course, right? But after that, the Beach Boys are a big, big influence, particularly surf-era Beach Boys, right up to pre-Pet Sounds. I love all that stuff. The Searchers are a very big influence. Mike Pender's guitar playing, just such a huge fan. Tommy James and the Shondells, big influence. So lots of 60s influence, but even from the 50s too. Buddy Holly, very big influence for me. Carl Perkins, Eddie Cochran. There's just so many greats from the late 50s into the mid 60s from that 7 or 8 year period there that really, really inspire me.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, since you are so influenced by music of that era, do you collect much music?
Oh,
whether it be record or memorabilia of that time?
absolutely, absolutely. And that's one of the things I love about this album is that it is put out on vinyl this time around. So kind of like my heroes of yesteryear, I finally get to be on, the vinyl disc as well now. So very, very cool honor there. But yeah, I do collect music memorabilia. I have tons of 45s and LPs. I wish I had it here in this room, but I have Ringo Starr Bubble Bath from 64, I believe. And you screw his head off and then you would pour the bubble bath, but it's sealed in the package. It's never been used. So
Oh, wow.
yeah, very, very cool. I've got lots of random stuff. The Traveling Wilburys from the 80s. I have a promotional Wilbury jam, and it's like a jelly jar, like you would get at a hotel or something like that.
Uh-huh.
It's only that big, and there's all kinds of references. It says, it's made with Savoy truffles, and, very, very cool piece. But yeah, I have lots of that stuff and some really, really great LPs and 45s, a couple thousand of them, honestly. So,
Well, I'll tell you what, as far as 45s go, we'll start with those.
sure.
What would be the crown jewel of your 45 collection?
Man, there's a couple that come to mind. Probably the first one that comes to mind is I got this on a sleeper auction on eBay probably 10 years ago. It came with a certificate of authenticity from Maria Elena, Buddy Holly's late wife, and it is her personal copy of the Crickets' "It's So Easy" song.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and that's one of my favorite songs ever, let alone my favorite Buddy Holly tunes. So it's really cool. It's got the COA signed by Maria Elena, but I can't help but wonder if it was like her and Buddy's copy, but Buddy passed away, so now it's her copy, and that's the way that it showed up on the
Right.
certificate of authenticity. In my mind, I'm going to pretend Buddy Holly also owned it. I guess I'll never really know, but it is a very, very cool piece and probably the crown jewel of the 45s, at least.
Well, as it should be. You'd be hard pressed to top that.
It's pretty dang cool. I've got to hand it on that one. That one is pretty rad.
Yeah. Now, how about as far as LPs go? What are a few of the records that you've got that you would, put at the top of your collection?
Yeah, I have a Monkees Headquarters LP signed by all four Monkees. So
Very nice.
that's got to be toward the top of the list. I mean, that's like having every Beach Boy or every Beatle sign an album, which ironically, that would probably be my number two, maybe number one. I guess it depends on what day you catch me. But I have a Pet Sounds signed by Brian Wilson, Mike Love, Al Jardine, and Bruce Johnston. So all of the living Beach Boys that played on it that are alive for me. Of course, I never shared the planet with Dennis, and he passed before I was even born. But I've gotten to meet all those guys I just mentioned. They were all fantastic, and it was a really great experience to get to meet those guys. And of course, to hang that album on my wall now is pretty cool to walk past every day.
Yeah. Well, tell me this: when you got to meet them, what was that like?
Yeah, it was really fantastic. Brian Wilson and Al Jardine, that was before a Brian Wilson concert. They did like a meet and greet. I think that would have been back in 2013 or so. And, you go and you get your picture and they'll sign the album and whatnot. And then Mike Love and Bruce Johnston was last year, 2020. It was the last concert I saw before the lockdown. And I thought, you know what? It would be really cool to, get them to sign my album too. I'm such a huge Beach Boys fan. And so I bought myself a little Christmas present, which was the pass to go meet Mike and Bruce. And when they came out, Bruce came around the corner and he signed the album, but he saw that Blondie Chapin had signed the album too. Blondie was in the Beach Boys for the Sail on Sailor era. And right. Bruce, you'll have to pardon my French, I'm quoting him. Bruce said, "Who the fuck signed this?" And I said, "It's Blondie Chapin." And he said, "He's not a Beach Boy. He ruined your album. Why did he sign this?" And I explained that it's kind of an assembly line with the Brian Wilson thing. And he said, "You need to figure out how you can get that Sharpie off of there. He's not a Beach Boy and he ruined your album." And my face was exactly like yours. I couldn't believe it. I mean, how do you really feel, Bruce? But he was very nice otherwise. We chatted a little bit about, coming to Nashville and the Ryman, and he was very kind. And when Mike came around the corner, he was all doing his Mike Love thing with all his rings and whatnot. And when it's kind of weird. I guess my experience with both of them was a little odd when it came to getting the album signed. Mike held the album and he went, "Wow, check it out. You've got all of the Beach Boys to sign this." And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "Tell me, would it bother you if I drew a little Hitler mustache on Mr. Al Jardine before I signed this?" And I said, "Yeah, that would bother me." I said, that's going to be hanging on my wall, and I don't want to walk past that, every day and see that." And he goes, "It would absolutely make my night. Are you sure?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm sure." And then he signed it, and I told him that I got to spend a little bit of time with Hal Blaine before Hal passed, and Hal had wonderful things to say about Mike and Brian and Carl and everything. And I think Mike was, very glad to hear that from Hal, because of course he had passed, some time before. But it was a cool experience all in all. Definitely a little interesting. Michael Love always leaves an interesting story wherever he goes, to say the least. So, but no, all things aside with, what our opinions may or may not be about him, it's very cool to get to meet somebody like Brian and Mike and Bruce and Al that have just had such a huge impact on me as a musician and as a fan. So,
did you get to ask Bruce about I Write the Songs?
I didn't know. If I would have gotten to talk to Bruce more, I actually would have rather talked to him about the Ripcords, which of course was his band before the Beach Boys. But they always mention in those live shows, that Bruce is a Grammy-winning songwriter for I Write the Songs, and it's pretty crazy. He's had quite the career.
Yes, he has. He's kind of under the radar. If you're a music aficionado, but otherwise he's been very clandestine about all of his accomplishments.
Unsung hero for sure.
Yes,
massively underrated for sure.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned Hal Blaine. That had to be really cool, given how many sessions he played on with the Wrecking Crew.
Absolutely amazing. Yeah, I was working on a documentary, and we went to Hal's house to film with him, and he was 89 at the time. This was just a few months before he passed, actually. And we figured, we'll probably get an hour or two with him. We don't want to, be in his hair, but he invited us into his house to come film. And when we went, he just kept telling story after story. He'd finish a Sinatra story and he'd be able to, swing over to a Beach Boys story. And then that would lead into a Monkees story and so on and so forth. So it just went on, and we just let the cameras keep rolling. And we went to dinner with him afterward that night. And, it's so crazy sitting there and you hear these songs the Wrecking Crew played coming over the speaker. And here we are sitting with him at dinner, and kind of the sad but true story about the Wrecking Crew is so few people know who those guys are or were. And, it's just a day I'll never forget. He was so kind. He was so amazing. And, just a few months later, he had his 90th birthday party at the Baked Potato Club in Studio City, which is the club that the Wrecking Crew opened, so that after they finished doing their, pop music sessions, they could go somewhere and play jazz music, which is what all those guys, really what their passion was. So anyways, we heard about this birthday party, and Hal actually ended up inviting us, the four of us from the video crew that went to his house. He only invited a couple dozen people. And when we got there, it was incredible. Got to see Hal and say hi again. Denny Sywell from Wings was there, Slim Jim Phantom from the Stray Cats, Chad Smith from Red Hot Chili Peppers, a lot of drummers, as you can imagine. I was really excited, though, that Dean Torrance was there, which is from Jan and Dean, of course, which was really cool. I think everybody was jazzed about the drummers, but I'm like, whoa, half of Jan and Dean is here. I'm a huge Beach Boys and surf music fan, if you can't tell, but
I picked up on that.
Yeah. Just to kind of bring that story to a close, there was like this murmur around the room of like, oh, when's he showing up? When is he showing up? And we had no idea what was going on. In a surprise appearance, Charlie Watts from the Rolling Stones ended up showing up. And it was really wild when he showed up. Everybody there was like, super professional. Hey, man, how you doing? Blah, blah, blah. But when Charlie showed up, you would have thought it was 1965. Everybody wanted to say hi, get a picture, talk to him. And he had actually come in with Jim Keltner, who, of course, played on George Harrison stuff, Tom Petty. And I was standing here, and Charlie and Jim kind of got pushed like right near where I was standing. And Charlie rubbed the back of his neck and said, "Jim, love, do you mind if we get out of here? I'm feeling a bit sweltered." And Jim said, "Oh, yeah, of course." And they snuck out the back door. And I mean, Charlie couldn't have been there for 10 minutes tops.
Oh, wow.
And I kind of feel bad that he got a little, surrounded to the point that he didn't feel comfortable hanging out, but it's very cool to see him. And, another one of those moments, just totally unforgettable.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, do you remember any of the stories that Hal told you?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, just so many of them. I think probably my favorite story is he was telling me that, he has drummed in, maybe not on sessions, but he's met so many, different musicians and things like that. And he was talking about George Harrison because he was hired to play on the Jackie Lomax sessions, which George was producing. And at his house, he showed us on his wall that he had a framed letter from George Harrison. And it said something to the effect of, hey, Hal, can't wait to send you the test pressing of the Jackie Lomax sessions. Thank you so much for playing on them, so on and so forth. It's a real honor to have met and worked with you. And, hope to keep in touch and talk soon. And then at the bottom, it was just signed George. And then in parentheses, real small, it said Harrison, as if you wouldn't know.
Yeah.
But he had kept the letter. He kept the envelope it came in, and he had a great picture blown up of him behind the drum kit, and George is kind of next to him like this. Just a really, really fantastic photo. And, pretty cool to hear about working with George Harrison in the studio, not on a George Harrison, solo project per se.
Right.
So, just fantastic.
Absolutely. Well, I'll tell you what, looking at the background there, I see a couple of guitars.
My babies, my Rickenbacker guitars. Well, let me see if I lean this way, you can see them all. The Gretsch back there is a Gretsch Tennessee Rose. That is a reissue of what George Harrison would have played at Shea Stadium. Also, the Animals would have played that guitar. A lot of bands played that one. Next to it, it's a little blown out in the light there, but that is a Rickenbacker 1997 model, Rose Morris, which is similar to Tom Petty, Pete Townsend. Those guys would have played that one. Next to that is an Epiphone Casino. Would have been what John Lennon played at the rooftop gig. And then next to that is my all-time favorite guitar. I'm falling in love just looking at it on the screen. It's the Rickenbacker 36012 C64 model, or excuse me, V64 model. And that's a 1964 reissue of what would have been the George Harrison guitar of the era. So the Hard Day's Night 12 string and all of that. And then just out of frame, I never know which way to point because the camera's mirrored. Just out of frame is the Rickenbacker 325, which is a John Lennon model, the tiny little guitar he played. So a little bit of everything there.
Well, I'll tell you, now that you've got that collection, where did you start with as far as guitars go?
Yeah, as far as guitars went, I mean, I got my first guitar when I was 10. It was like a no-name Stratocaster. Got a Les Paul maybe a year or two after that, like a, Epiphone, little kitty Les Paul, nothing too exciting. But my first, big boy guitar was the Gretsch back here that we were talking about. I'm telling you, I never know which way to point. It's that Gretsch right here. That was my first, really, really pro guitar. And yeah, it's such a great guitar. It sounds like butter, but you can really rock it out too. Not quite as much as some of my other Gretches. It's very, very smooth. So I love it. That would have been the kind of guitar George Harrison played on like Rubber Soul, like that era of the Beatles. So, to give you a for instance of how that might, translate.
Mm-hmm. Well, with that said, who would you say are, say, three of the players that had the biggest impact on you?
Yeah, I mean, that's awesome. I love that. So first and foremost, I mean, George Harrison, hard to say that it's not him. He's just incredible. I'm going to stretch it to four. I need four because it's for all different reasons. Buddy Holly comes up next. A lot of people don't necessarily think of him as, some incredible guitar player. He was certainly no Hendrix. He was certainly no, Chuck Berry. But at the same time, I think that there's more to guitar than just being able to play a hot solo. And of course he did do that too, but knowing chord structures and being a songwriter and being able to voice a guitar is super important. And Buddy Holly is just such a huge, huge influence on me as a writer that I have to put him in there just, from a songwriting angle of guitar. Mike Pender of the Searchers, his 12-string guitar approach, I think of the way he plays guitar every time I pick up my 12 string, because again, is he the best technical player? No, he's not. Is he, Hendrix? No, not at all. But he's so great at playing a simple song for simplicity's sake, right? He's so fantastic at, just pulling out the best parts. And I don't know. I love a simple guitar solo. Sometimes you think of like Love Potion number 9, or the riff from When You Walk in the Room. Of course, neither of those are original songs, but the approach that's there, the way he spaces the notes. And I know it's super nerdy, but we're talking about my favorite guitar players here. Come on. And then last but not least would be Carl Wilson. Of course, Carl Wilson. Carl was like fine wine, as the Beach Boys career went on, he just got better and better. And of course, there are a lot of those early tracks that were the Wrecking Crew, but of course, Carl still had to play them live too. And I love seeing from the, 1965 era of the Beach Boys, him playing, ironically, this same style of 12 string, very, very similar at least. And seeing him do all the songs on the 12 string, like Fun, Fun, Fun. And, just those are not easy songs to solo on a 12 string because there's a lot of bending going on and whatnot. But I'm just such a huge Carl fan. And to think how great he was so young too is just mind blowing. And to think later on as you get into the careers of the Beach Boys and think, stuff like Wild Honey and even all the way up to Kokomo, his little midsection of Kokomo there is just incredible. And I mean, I'm just such a huge Beach Boys fanboy. I love them all. They're amazing. It's just,
to me, Carl is massively underappreciated.
100%.
Yeah. The vocals, the guitar playing, but also his production. I mean, he's the one who produced I Can Hear Music.
It's incredible. It's incredible. I Can Hear Music, I think, is one of the best sonic examples of the Beach Boys. How, there's really 2 points. When the song comes in, you kind of have this, and it comes at you. And then out of the, doo-wop section, out of that section, you also have this, It's so amazing the way it slides in, or maybe the volume slides up twice in the same song. Different effects, and it works great both times. But yeah, I think all the Beach Boys will always be criminally underrated. I'm such a huge fan.
Yeah. Well, talk about Mike Pender. To me, he's an example of less is more.
100%.
Because when you can get the most out of the least, you can really make an impact, because it's that simplicity that really can set the tone and strike that emotion.
Sure, absolutely. And, I think that he's very much in the same category as I was explaining about Buddy Holly. It's not always about the, hot solos or whatever. Sometimes it's about playing for the song and the simplicity. It's, in the same vein, like, some people will be like, oh, Ringo isn't the best drummer ever. Maybe not on a technical level, but you've got to put him in the running on a technique level, right? As far as things like range, She Said, A Day in the Life, where he knows exactly when to push, exactly when to pull back. He's always there for the song. And I mean, I just, I think that we've gotten so swept up in technical know-how that we kind of tend to forget about, how simplicity can be key sometimes. And I always try to reel myself back and, understand that and try to implement that into my own stuff too.
Well, and the same could be said on vocals, where, histrionics for a while overtook the actual, delivery of the vocal.
Sure. And, vocals are a whole other thing too. Sometimes not the best singer, but if they get the message across, the first one that comes to mind for me is like Bob Dylan. Is certainly far from the best technical singer, but you hear a song like Tangled Up in Blue, and of course lots of people have covered it, but there's something about the rasp and the honesty about his voice. Again, the best technical performance, definitely not, but an incredible standout performance regardless. So I think it's fantastic. I love it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, tell you what, we mentioned it at the start of the show, Compositions is out. So let's talk a little bit about that. You've got 10 originals and 1 cover, and that cover has got a really interesting backstory.
It does. So the cover is Junior's Farm, the old Paul McCartney and Wings tune. And in the summer of 2019, I got to go to the real Junior's Farm. Paul and Wings came to Nashville in 1974 for 6 weeks. And while they were here, they were rehearsing the live band for the first time. They were working on new material. And among that new material was, of course, Junior's Farm. And when I got to go to Junior's Farm in 2019, it wasn't for no reason. It was on special occasion. I got to go with Geoff Britton, who was the drummer in Paul McCartney and Wings at the time, and he played on Junior's Farm. And it was the first time he had been back to the farm since 1974. So it was the 45th anniversary at that point. And to go with him and kind of see the wonder in his eyes and, just see him reminisce, all these years ago and hear the stories firsthand, it was just incredible. And my first album, Straighten Up, was not out yet, but I gave it to him and said, hey, here's what I do, blah, blah, blah. And he got back to me and said, I love this album. The only thing I don't like about it is that I didn't get to play on it. And I said, well, I'm going to be working on more, so I'm going to hold you to that if you would, like to play on it. And he said, oh, my gosh, I'd love to. So the plan was for him to come back to Nashville in 2020. We were going to cut it all live, but I don't think I have to go into too much detail to tell you that didn't happen. But thanks to technology, we were able to do it digitally. So I recorded everything here in Nashville. I sent him Junior's Farm plus 3 other original tracks, original music tracks, and he recorded them where he lives in Spain and sent them back. We mixed them in, and he's on the album. So it's really, really fantastic. And one of the cool things about having him on Junior's Farm is Geoff has only ever recorded Junior's Farm with 2 people, Paul McCartney and myself. So it's a really, really exciting club to be in, although I think I'm a little more excited about it than Paul, but it's still not a bad club to be in.
You never know.
You never know. I don't know if Paul loses sleep about it like I do, but
well, to tell you what, the thing that strikes me about the album is how the songs, so many of them, sound like they could be on soundtrack albums.
Oh, well,
or soundtracks to film. Now, we mentioned Any Second Now, and to me, that sounds like a lost, track from That Thing You Do.
Wow, you're really flattering me over here. That's so kind. Thank you. I'm such a huge fan of That Thing You Do. In fact, every time I pick up a guitar, I think, how can I do equal or better? At least that's what I strive for, because I just think it's the perfect, pop song, especially in this kind of retro rock corner. But yeah, that's so kind. Any Second Now was very much written in the That Thing You Do vein. I feel like it could have been, their next single had they stayed together, had Jimmy not quit.
Yeah. Now, Does What She Does.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you've seen or, are familiar with the movie Top Secret.
I can't say I am, no.
Okay, it was the Zucker brothers that did Airplane. It was their spy spoof, but it was also an Elvis movie spoof as well. So the soundtrack, the songs are, supposed to sound like they would have been on an Elvis soundtrack, and the music's really good.
Cool.
For it. And to me, Does What She Does sounds like it could have been in that movie.
Oh, wow. Well, I'll take that. Does What She Does, I've been getting a lot of, Beach Boys and Jan and Dean comments. Of course, you've got those kind of, fun backing vocals and things like that. And to be fair, that was the angle my songwriting partner and I went for. 2 songs on the album are co-written with my friend Steve Rempus, and he's the guitar player in my live band. But this is one of them. And Steve came to me and said, hey, for our live show, I think we need a Beach Boys style original song. What do you think? And I said, I think you're right. So he brought it over, and it was the does what she does, she does, she does is what he brought. And so I kind of added the words to it. And, it's only 2 minutes long, so it's not a very long song, but it's certainly in, traditional Beach Boy fashion in that way, too. Those songs weren't very long. So definitely one of my favorites on the album, for sure.
Yeah. Now, another track, Red Eye,
mm-hmm.
has got a really nice guitar sound. What did you play on that track?
That would have been the Rickenbacker 12-string. 100%. Every guitar you hear on that track is this guitar. And ironically, that song was written with Mike Pender in mind. My band was supposed to play in Liverpool last year at at the Cavern. Actually, we were supposed to play at the Cavern Club, and of course, didn't happen because of COVID. But we were really hoping to do some recording while we were over there. Red Eye being one of those songs, and we were hoping to find a way to get to Mike Pender to have him play on it. And so you'll notice that the guitar solo from that song is structured in kind of two parts. And the idea would have been to have a little bit of a guitar battle, if you will. Unfortunately, I ended up picking up all the slack and played both parts, but you never know what the future might hold. So, fingers crossed, you never know.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, tell you what, we are coming up here on our time. So is there anything that all the things we covered, in this episode, Johnathan, that we didn't get to that you want to make sure that we do?
Yeah, just I hope people enjoy the album. Comes out tomorrow, June 4th. And it's on CD, vinyl, and of course, streaming and digital downloads. So no matter how you consume music, you can get it wherever you like. I see the little banner down below will take you to my website. That's where you can order a signed copy, but it's also available online from Amazon, Target, Barnes & Noble, all of those great places you can get music. And thank you so much for having me, Michael. It's so great to be here, and I'm so appreciative of your time, and so glad you dig the album.
Well, I'll tell you what, it's been a lot of fun, a lot of great stories. As you've seen throughout the show, we've had Jonathan's website and social media and all those things on there so that you can get all things Johnathan. So I want to thank everybody for watching. Johnathan, thank you for being here. Everybody, have a good night.
Awesome. Thank you.
This has been Music Night at the Majestic with Michael Boswell. If you enjoyed this edition of Music Night at the Majestic, follow us on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, and at musicnight.net. Music Night at the Majestic is a copyright production of Starliner Media. Any use of the accounts and descriptions of this program, its audio or visual content, without the express written consent of Starliner Media is prohibited. Thank you for joining us this evening. We'll see you next time for Music Night at the Majestic. This is your announcer speaking. Starliner Media.